Good morning. Welcome to our verse-by-verse Bible study. We are in Exodus chapter 25, and we're going to be exploring the articles that went into the making of the tabernacle. If you're not familiar with what the tabernacle is, this was the tent of meeting that God will instruct Moses to make, so that as the children of Israel are making their journey through the wilderness to the promised land, it would be the place where they could come and make their sacrifices before the Lord, where the priests could take those sacrifices and once a year make the atonement that was necessary for the people in the most holy place. And we're going to look at the construction of the tabernacle itself, the tent itself that was made, as well as the courtyard areas and the furnishings that went into the tabernacle. There's a lot of symbolism for all of these things, and we're not going to go through an exhaustive study of all the symbols because we would be here weeks and weeks and weeks just making our way through this chapter, but there's a lot of wonderful resources that if you want to do your own study on this, I would encourage you to do so, and there's many books that have been written on this, so have at it. In the meantime, let us begin Exodus chapter 25, and we'll begin in verse 1. Then the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, Speak to the children of Israel, that they bring me an offering. From everyone who gives it willingly with his heart, you shall take my offering. And this is the offering you shall take from them: gold, silver, and bronze, blue, purple, and scarlet thread, fine linen and goat's hair, ram's skins dyed red, badger skins, and acacia wood, oil for the light, and spices for the anointing oil, and the sweet incense, onyx stones, and stones to be set in the ephod and in the breastplate. And let them make me a sanctuary, that I may dwell among them, according to all that I show you, that is, the pattern of the tabernacle, and the pattern of all its furnishings, just so you shall make it. Moses is up on the mountain with God. He's going to be there 40 days and 40 nights. He will be there again another 40 days and 40 nights. And during this time, the Lord is speaking to him, teaching him, and showing him in very distinct terms the type of tabernacle or tent that he wants them to build, the dimensions of it, the furnishings of it, the materials of it. God doesn't leave anything to chance. This is a reflection of the heavenly places of the tabernacle in heaven. God wants us to have here on earth some idea of what it is like in the heavenly places. And this is not an exact duplication of a heavenly structure, but it is a representation to give us a sense of some of the things that are going on in regard to man, his relationship with God, and his redemption. And many of these things are depicted in there, as well as the heart of God, God's desire to dwell among mankind. If you go all the way back in the Bible to the book of Genesis, into the first chapter when man is created, God's desire was to fellowship with Adam. He would walk with him every day in the cool of the garden, and he would spend time with him, and it was in the heart of God to have a close, intimate relationship. Jesus would describe this kind of relationship that he wanted with his disciples as he being the vine and we being the branches, that we are part of him, that we become one with him. And this is in the heart of this God, this oneness that he wants to have with his people, with his children. God is not an absentee father. He doesn't create children and abandon them. When God has his family, God wants to dwell with them and have them close to him so that they could experience all of his goodness. So he begins this chapter calling for an offering from the people of the materials that they will need to produce this tabernacle. It's going to be made with some very precious things: gold, silver, bronze. We're going to see that he's also going to ask them for precious stones and many other things. Now, they were slaves in Egypt, as you can remember, slaves did not have a lot of money, but as they were getting ready to leave, they went according to God's command to all their Egyptians, and they asked for them of certain things, and basically it says they plundered the Egyptians, meaning that there was great wealth that was transferred from the nation of Egypt to the children of Israel. You can almost think about it as the wages that they were due for all the years that they served the Egyptians. So they all got paid in the end at one time. And now what God has given them, he wants them to willingly give to him for his work. The most important thing you have to remember about everything that you hear about giving, according to the Christian church, is that it should be and always must be from a willing heart. It is never the church's place to compel people to give, to put a guilt trip on people to give. Giving is commanded by God because God wants us to reflect him, or God wants us to imitate him, and God, because he loves, he gives. And he wants us to have that same aspect to our personality, that since we love God, and because we love God, we should love people, and because we love people, therefore we should give to those things that are going to be of benefit to other people. But it needs to be done willingly. God does not compel giving. He didn't say to Moses, go out, take a bunch of guys with spears, and go into everybody's tent and take from them what I need. He doesn't say that. He doesn't say cry in front of them and beg so that they feel really bad so that they'll give. He doesn't say construct any type of a program to get people to give. He says ask them, and everyone who gives willingly from his heart, take that offering. In the church, when we ask for money for the work of the church, the way that we ask is saying, anyone who is willing to share with the church those things that they've been blessed with by God for the work of God, give it willingly. That's it. It's as simple as that. If you're not willing to give, that means that you will lose out on the blessing. God's work's still going to get done. God's going to provide for the things that he wants to have done. But we encourage people to give because we want them to develop in their walk with God. And part of that is sharing a portion of what God gives us. People will ask sometimes, well, how much should I give? And the real answer to that is, it depends on you and what you're willing to give. Everything belongs to God anyway. He's given it all to you. If you wanted to give back everything that he's giving, you'd have to give it all. But God doesn't ask you to give it all in most cases. Sometimes he will. But what he wants us to do is ask him and say, Father, this is all your stuff. You've given it to me. I'm now a steward of it or a caretaker of it. How can I use it in a way that will be a blessing to other people? And he will instruct you. If you ask with a heart, he will tell you how to give. And one thing I will tell you, the closer you get to God, the more you will give. Because it's part of the nature of God to give and give abundantly. And as we get closer to him and more like him, you're going to find out that you just give more naturally and you get excited about giving. Paul talks about in his book of Corinthians, his letter, he says that you should be a cheerful giver or a hilarious giver. Basically saying that the type of giving that you should do is giving that makes you so happy that you're so excited to give and see what God will do with it. We have so many wonderful examples in the Bible of people giving. And I think one of the prettiest ones, or the most beautiful ones, is when the Lord is about to feed the 5,000. He asks his disciples, what do you have to give them? And they don't really have anything to give. And they say, well, there's a little boy here, and he has some loaves, and he has some fishes. And they say, what is this compared to the big need that we have? And they take those loaves and fishes and they bring them to the Lord, and he prays over them, he blesses them, he breaks them. And as he breaks them, he multiplies them, and he distributes it so that the little turned into a mass that was more than enough to meet the need. God does wonderful things when we give. And I'm sure that that young man thought about how his lunch, his little loaves and fishes that he had brought, when given to God, produced something miraculous. If we hold on to it, it can never grow. It can never be used for something so wonderful. But when we let it go, when we let it flow back into the hand of God, imagine what he can do with these things. And it should be exciting for us to give. And this is how Moses is instructed to ask for these donations from everyone who gives it willingly with his heart. You shall take an offering. And he lists the thing for them to offer: gold, silver, bronze, purple, scarlet thread, fine linen and goat's hair, ram skins dyed red, badger skins and acacia wood, oil for the light, spices for the anointing oil, and sweet incense, onyx stones and stones to be set in the ephod and in the breastplate. And they're now going to construct a sanctuary, a tabernacle, a tent of meeting. Verse 10 begins talking about the ark of the testimony. And they shall make an ark of acacia wood, 2.5 cubits shall be its length, 1.5 cubits its width, and 1.5 cubits its height. You may say, what's a cubit? Well, the best guess for a cubit, what it represented was the distance from the elbow, if you hold out your hand, to your fingertips. That was a cubit. This is approximately 18 inches. We don't know exactly what the cubit was, but the best guess that most people use is about 18 inches. So if you keep in your mind it's 1.5 feet, then you can have these dimensions make some sense to you. So this ark of acacia wood was going to be 2.5 cubits in its length. So you could take 2.5 times 18 inches, and you'll get the length of this box. And you'll notice that its width and its height are the same. So what we have is a rectangular box. Let's keep reading, and then we'll take a look at this a little bit more. You shall overlay it with pure gold inside and out. You shall overlay it, and you shall make on it a molding of gold all around. You shall cast 4 rings of gold for it, and put them in its 4 corners. 2 rings shall be on one side, and 2 rings on the other side. And you shall make poles of acacia wood, and overlay them with gold. You shall put poles into the rings on the side of the ark, that the ark may be carried by them. The poles shall be in rings of the ark; they shall not be taken from it. You shall put the ark of the testimony, which I give you, and you shall put into the ark of the testimony which I give you. You shall make a mercy seat of pure gold. 2.5 cubits shall be its length, and 1.5 cubits its width. You shall make 2 cherubim of gold of hammered work. You shall make them at 2 ends of the mercy seat. Make 1 cherubim at one end, and the other cherubim at the other end. You shall make the cherubim at the 2 ends of it, one piece with the mercy seat. And the cherubim shall stretch out their wings above, covering the mercy seat with their wings, and they shall face one another. The faces of the cherubim shall be toward the mercy seat. And you shall put the mercy seat on the top of the ark, and in the ark you shall put the testimony that I will give you, and there I will meet with you, and I will speak with you from above the mercy seat, from between the 2 cherubim, which are on the ark of the testimony, about everything which I will give you in commandment to the children of Israel. So they're asked to make this box, the Ark of the Covenant. The ark, if you think about it, when Moses was put into the river, it says he was put into an ark, right, at this little box. This box is meant to hold the testimony or the commandments which God will give, that he's going to send Moses down from the mountain with the written law. Right? We think of the 10 Commandments, right? God, written with the finger of God, that those testimony, those laws would be going into this ark to be kept there. We'll see later on in the scriptures that some other things will also be placed into the Ark of the Testimony. There will be some manna placed in there as a memorial. A few other things from time to time, but in the end, the thing that is to remain there is this Ark of the Testimony, the law. So you have this box that's open, and now there's going to be a lid made for the box. And this lid has a separate name. So the Ark is the box without a lid, and then the lid on it has its separate name. It's called the mercy seat, and it's to be made of pure gold. And on the top of it, it's to have 2 cherubim. Now these were the angels that stand before the throne of God. They're described for us in many places in the Bible as having multiple sets of wings. Sometimes they're described also having a numerous faces, 4 faces that these cherubim have. And these are these special angels that are before the throne of God that are worshiping there. So we can see that God is giving us a little bit of the indication of what his throne room is like. And we'll get descriptions of this in Ezekiel with the Lord with the cherubim, in the book of Revelations, the cherubim before the Lord in worship. So in the tabernacle, we're getting this depiction of the throne room of God. This mercy seat is to go on top of the box, so that seals what the contents of the box in. And God says that he will meet with Moses from above that mercy seat. So we kind of have this stack going on there. We have the box at the bottom, which contains the law, the testimony. Then we have this mercy seat, as it's called, on top of that. And then on top of that is God, right? So as the priest would come in to make the atonement for the people once a year, he would have to come in with blood, a blood sacrifice, and the blood would have to go on the mercy seat. That for man to have his sins reconciled to God, he would have to get past the law, and the law would find him guilty. And the penalty of disobeying the law was death. So there needed to be blood that was shed. So there was blood that goes upon the mercy seat. But the merciful part of the mercy seat is that it's not our blood that's applied there, it's the blood of a sacrifice or a substitute, which we know eventually will be the perfect sacrifice of Jesus Christ himself. And that sacrifice of his blood can then bring us into perfect communion with God, and we can then meet with him and have fellowship with him, having our sin dealt with and being free from the judgment of it. So beautiful symbols here, talking about man and his relationship with God and how it could be perfected, but only through the sacrifice that was to be made. If you're having a hard time picturing this, you can take a look at, here's a little photo. Let me see if I can get this on the screen for you. Bear with me 1 second. This is just an artist rendition. Now, nobody knows exactly what the ark looked like, but you can see here that it's a box, a rectangular box, and on top of it, this lid called the mercy seat with these cherubim with their wings outstretched over it, and the poles of acacia wood going through their rings that would extend out from beyond the ark so that it could be carried by people when it needed to be moved from place to place. It will not look like this artist depicted it. We don't know exactly how it was designed in terms of what the cherubim exactly looked like and how they were how they were etched or carved, finished. But this gives you a general idea of the proportions. It's not very big. We're only talking, it's a little over, 3 feet or something in length, 2 something feet in width and height. So it's not a very, very big box at all that we're talking about. Then he talks about making the table of showbread. You shall also make a table of acacia wood. 2 cubits shall be its length, a cubit its width, and a cubit and a half its height. And you shall overlay it with pure gold, and make a molding of gold all around. You shall make for it a frame of a handbreadth all around, and you shall make a gold molding for the frame all around. And you shall make for it 4 rings of gold, and put the rings in the 4 corners that are at its 4 legs. The rings shall be close to the frame, as holders for the poles to bear the table. And you shall make poles of acacia wood and overlay them with gold, that the table may be carried with you. And you shall make its dishes and its pans, its pitchers and its bowls for pouring. You shall make them of pure gold, and you shall set the showbread on the table before me always. God is asking them to construct a table that's going to be included in the temple or the tabernacle furnishings. And this table was to hold the showbread. These were loaves that were to be baked and changed every day, fresh bread that was put in front of the Lord. And there's symbolism again for the bread and the number of loaves that would be out there and why they were changed every day. And you can kind of look into all those things, and there's a lot to study. But suffice it to say, it's a small table. As you can see, a length 2 cubits, right? So 36 inches, right? 3 feet. And the width of it, you can look at its proportions. Again, a small table made of wood overlaid with pure gold, also having rings molded into it through which poles would be inserted so that this table can also be carried. These articles were holy and sanctified to God. Sanctified meaning set apart. They were to be used only for the purpose that God had instructed them, and they were not to be touched or handled except by the priests when they were being used in the way that God had intended them to be used inside the tabernacle. That's one of the reasons why they have these carrying poles. It makes it obviously easier to move these things with all the gold on them. They do have a bit of weight to them. But it was also so that those who carried them did not actually have to handle them. If you remember the story later on in the life of David, he will be moving the Ark of the Covenant into Jerusalem so he could have it near him. And they will put it on a cart, which is not the way it should have been carried. It should have been carried by the Levites using those poles. And while it's on the cart, the cart hits a rut, the Ark of the Covenant moves, and one of the men who's up there driving with it or along with it puts his hand out to steady it so that it doesn't fall. And when he does that, God strikes him down and kills him because he came in contact with the holy, and he didn't come in contact the way that God had prescribed. Remember, this was supposed to be in the tabernacle of meeting. Only the priest could come in there once a year. There had to be blood sacrifice. We can't ever come into the presence of God in his holiness without having our sin atoned with. And poor Uzzah, who reached out his hand, lost his life doing that. So these poles for carrying these things allowed those who were going to bear these furnishings from one place to another to carry them, but to be at a safe distance so as not to touch them physically. The gold lampstand, another article. You shall make a lampstand of pure gold, and a lampstand shall be of hammered work. Its shaft and its branches, its bowls, its ornamental knobs and flowers shall be of one piece. And 6 branches shall come out of its side, 3 branches of the lampstand out of one side, and 3 branches of the lampstand out of the other. 3 bowls shall be made like almond blossoms on one branch, with an ornamental knob and a flower, and 3 bowls made like an almond blossoms on the other branch, with an ornamental knob and a flower. And so for the 6 branches that come out of the lampstand. On the lampstand itself 4 bowls shall be made like almond blossoms, each with its ornamental knob and flower. And there shall be a knob under the first 2 branches of the same, and a knob under the second 2 branches of the same, and a knob under the third 2 branches of the same, according to the 6 branches that extend from the lampstand. Their knobs and their branches shall be of one piece. All of it shall be one hammered piece of gold. You shall make 7 lamps for it, and they shall arrange its lamps so that they give light in the front of it. And its wicks, trimmers, and their trays shall be of pure gold. It shall be made of a talent of pure gold with all these utensils, and see to it that you make them according to the pattern which was shown to you on the mountain. So another article that's going to be in the tabernacle of meeting is this golden lampstand. If you picture in your mind when he starts to give us the proportions of the tent itself, it's going to be completely covered with both fabric and then different types of skins to make a covering and a roof and sides for this tent. Nowhere is it depicted in this whole tent are there anything like windows. So there's no outside light that comes in. So when you go into this tabernacle, it's completely dark. So they need a light source inside of it. So in the first part, and the inner part of this tabernacle, the tent, it's going to be divided into two places. There's going to be what they call the holy place and the most holy place. The holy place is the first room you would go into, where you would have this table of showbread and the table of incense and this golden lampstand. And then beyond another doorway or another screen that would come down or a veil, you would go into the most holy place where there would be the Ark of the Covenant and the mercy seat. Outside where you would first enter is that table of showbread that we just looked at, this gold lampstand that we just read the description of, also this table of incense that will be there as well, and the light that's provided in that room comes from this lampstand. It says that there's going to be 7 flames that are lit on this light. It uses oil to burn, and part of the jobs of the priest was to refill the oil every day. This light was never to go out inside of this tabernacle. It was always to be lit in there. It was the only light within that room. You will notice, though, that there is no light when you get beyond the next curtain and you go into the place where the Ark of the Covenant is. And that's because in that place, no natural light is required, but God himself lights the place, the presence of the Lord. If you read in the book of Revelations, you will see when the New Jerusalem comes down, the city of the Lord, that it will say that in that day there's no need for a sun to produce light because the presence of God will light it. So this tabernacle has some of these aspects of God's heavenly kingdom and the things that he has prepared. And one of those things that was happening in this tabernacle was in that place when they would go in to meet the Lord above the mercy seat, that God's presence would light the place. No man-made light, no outside light, no light of the sun was required, but God himself, who is light, would illuminate that place. So we have that reflection here. I know in these descriptions it's pretty hard to get a good idea of maybe what this lampstand looked like. And again, here's an artist's depiction of it. It's just a very crude drawing. Really, from the description, it's hard to get an idea or a full sense of what exactly they were talking about and how it was decorated. But you can see here basically that there's 7 lights on this, and it's all going to be made out of one piece of gold that's hammered and shaped into one light that's going to be there. And this light sits from the floor and comes up, so it had to have a fair amount of height to it. So that's chapter 25, and I think we've got a little bit more time. Why don't we press on into chapter 26, and we'll look a little bit more at some of these furnishings. And now we're going to look at the tent itself. And I'm going to read through a lot of these verses, and we'll just make comments as we get to certain sections of it. Something to keep in mind, you can note for yourself, not just the dimensions and the numbers of boards, and there are people who do all these calculations with the lengths of things, the dimensions of the building, the number of the loops and clasps that are there, also the materials that are used for each loop and each clasp, and the materials that are used to assemble this tent, and they assign meaning to all of these things. It's pretty interesting reading. A lot of it is people assigning certain attributes to certain materials, like people will talk about bronze, and they'll say bronze is something that represents judgment, and therefore if bronze is used in this place, it's reflecting a judgment of some sort of thing. I think it's very interesting reading because the Bible doesn't specifically tell us those things. There are things that can be inferred from them. Obviously, bronze, the altar that is made for the altar of sacrifice here in the tabernacle will be made of bronze. So there's some good background for describing certain attributes to certain materials. But while it makes fascinating reading, I wouldn't get too caught up in those things because sometimes people can stretch those things a little bit too far and maybe come out with some wrong conclusions in the end. But it's fascinating to do those studies. Anyway, begins chapter 26. Moreover, you shall make the tabernacle with 10 curtains of fine woven linen and blue and purple and scarlet thread with artistic design of cherubim. You shall weave them. The length of each curtain shall be 28 cubits. The width of each curtain shall be 4 cubits, and every one of the curtains shall have the same measurements. 5 curtains shall be coupled to one another, and the other 5 curtains shall be coupled to one another, and you shall make loops of blue yarn on the edge of the curtain on the sledge of one side, and likewise you shall do on the outer edge of the other curtain on the second set. 50 loops you shall make in one curtain, and 50 loops you shall make on the edge of the curtain that is on the end of the second set, that the loops may be clasped to one another. And you shall make 50 clasps of gold, and couple the curtains together with clasps, so that it may be one tabernacle. All right. He wants them to weave this first covering, and there's going to be layers of materials that make the tent itself. And the first one is woven out of blue and purple and scarlet thread, so very colorful, very artistic, with designs of cherubim and angels in it. And it's going to surround that tabernacle and be over top of it. And when you look around, you're going to see all these brilliant colors and all these beautiful angels, and it's going to be marvelous to look at. This whole tabernacle, keep in mind, is going to need to be portable. This is something that they will put up and take down every time they move during the time of their wilderness wanderings. And we know that that will eventually go on for more than 40 years, right? So God has to make this so that it can be built up, taken down, packed up, and moved. And that's why we see things are made in small items that need to then be put together to make a bigger item. It all has to break apart. You know, if you think about kind of like Legos in a sense. Obviously, these weren't Legos, but the idea was it's something to be built up and then taken back down, broken back down. So that's why there's so many curtains with so many lengths that need to be coupled and clasped together. You shall also make curtains of goat's hair to be a tent over the tabernacle. You shall make 11 curtains. The length of each curtain shall be 30 cubits, and the width of each curtain 4 cubits, and 11 cubits shall all, and the 11 curtains shall all have the same measurements. And you shall couple 5 curtains by themselves and 6 curtains by themselves, and you shall double over the 6th curtain at the forefront of the tent, and you shall make 50 loops on the edge of the curtain that is outermost in one set, and 50 loops on the edge of the curtain of the second set. And you shall make 50 bronze clasps, and put the clasps into the loops, and couple the tent together that it may be one. The remnant that remains of the curtain of the tent and the half curtain that remains shall hang over the back of the tabernacle, and a cubit on one side and a cubit on the other side of what remains of the length of the curtains of the tent shall hang over the sides of the tabernacle on this side and on that side to cover it. So here's the second layer, and this is now made out of goat's hair. So it becomes thicker and more coarse. It's less delicate, less artistic as we go covering to covering. And there's practical reasons for that, and then there's also some symbolic reasons for this as well. It goes on in verse 14, you shall make a covering of ram's skins dyed red for the tent, and a covering of badger skins above. The badger skin translation here is suspect. No one's really sure what type of skin this was, but this is going to be the final covering on the outside. And if you think about materials that are going to be used in this tent, the last outside covering is what's going to be in the elements. So it has to be the most durable. It has to be what's going to make it watertight for when it rains. So a thick skin or hide was used for that purpose. Whether it was the skin of a badger or some other animal, that's up for grabs. People have looked at at this, and they've thrown different animals as the most likely to be that animal that was used for this. But just so you know, this is a hide covering. You can think in your mind like a leather type of covering, right? A thick, tough skin for the outer shell of the tabernacle. And for the tabernacle you shall make boards of acacia wood standing upright. 10 cubits shall be the length of a board, and a cubit and a half shall be the width of each board. 2 tenons shall be in each board for binding one to another. Thus you shall make for all the boards of the tabernacle. And you shall make the boards of the tabernacle, 20 boards for the south side. You shall make 40 sockets of silver under the 20 boards, 2 sockets under each of the board for its 2 tenons. And for the second side of the tabernacle, the north side, there shall be 20 boards, and there are 40 sockets of silver, 2 sockets under each of the boards. And for the far side of the tabernacle westward, you shall make 6 boards, and you shall also make 2 boards for the 2 back corners of the tabernacle, and they shall be coupled together at the bottom, and they shall be coupled together at the top by 1 ring. Thus it shall be for both of them. They shall be for the 2 corners. So there shall be 8 boards with their silver sockets, 16 sockets, and 2 sockets under each board. So when you think about this temple area, right, we're going to have this tent that's in the middle. We talked about some of the articles that are going in that tent. We talked about the construction of the materials that are going to be for the coverings of the tent. Now we're giving some boards that are going to give things structure, and we're going to see also that he makes a perimeter for the whole tabernacle in the wilderness, that there will be kind of like a fencing that goes around it to distinguish where the area that the tabernacle resides is from the rest of the camp. So he's going to explain to us how many boards that they're going to need, what they're going to use these boards for, and how they're going to use it to set up the radius or the perimeter of this tabernacle area. These boards have to be coupled together, so there's going to be boards and bars that are going to hold each of the boards together to make them stand up. You shall make bars of acacia wood, 5 for the boards on one side of the tabernacle, 5 bars for the boards on the other side of the tabernacle, and 5 bars for the boards on the side of the tabernacle for the far side westward. The middle bar shall be passed through the midst of the boards from end to end. You shall overlay the boards with gold and make their rings of gold as holders for the bars, and overlay the bars with gold. And you shall raise up the tabernacle according to its pattern which you were shown on the mountain. And we'll see this phrase over and over again, that when God was speaking to Moses, he says, do it according to the pattern that you were shown. So God is not just giving him the information that we're reading here, but he's being much more explicit with Moses. He's showing him a pattern. He's depicting all of this out, how it comes together, what these pieces look like, how you not only make them, but how you assemble this all together. So Moses is getting complete plans to build this tabernacle. You shall make a veil woven of blue, purple, and scarlet thread and fine woven linen. It shall be woven in an artistic design of the cherubim. You shall hang it upon the 4 pillars of acacia wood overlaid with gold. Their hooks shall be gold upon 4 sockets of silver, and you shall hang the veil from the clasps. Then you shall bring the ark of the testimony in there behind the veil. The veil shall be a divider between you and the holy place and the most holy. You shall put the mercy seat on top of the ark of testimony in the most holy. You shall set up a table outside the veil, the lampstand across from the table on the side of the tabernacle toward the south, and you shall put a table on the north side. You shall make a screen for the door of the tabernacle, woven of blue, purple, and scarlet thread, and fine woven linen, made by a weaver. You shall make for the screen 5 pillars of acacia wood, and overlay them with gold. Their hooks shall be gold, and you shall cast 5 sockets of bronze for them. If you remember earlier, when we were reading about this, I mentioned that the layers of the materials that would make up the tabernacle, that would cover it, started with this intricate, beautiful material that was woven with blue and purple and scarlet and had all these cherubim in it, and that was on the inside. And then you had a covering, a coarse covering over that, and then you went to the ram skin, and then the badger skins over top of that. That as it went up layer by layer, it became more and more plain, right? Those tough elements were to protect the articles that were inside, but they also kept people from seeing in to the tabernacle. So from the outside, it just looked like a very rough tent. It wasn't anything that was admirable about it. But when you went into the inside, you were transported into this complete other place, a place that is filled with gold and beautiful ornamental pieces, and this light that is shining off everything, and pictures of cherubim and all these colors, and this fantastic, beautiful decor. And then when you get into the most holy place, the light of God in there. And everything that you find in this temple that's glorious is on the inside, not on the outside. It's not until you get on the inside that you see the difference. I think it's interesting that we think about two aspects of this. One, when Jesus Christ was born, he was God, but he was cloaked in flesh. He was a baby just like any other baby. There was nothing that was miraculous about him from a physique. He was just an ordinary baby. As a matter of fact, that the Bible will describe Jesus and the Messiah as having no form or comeliness that we should desire him. That it doesn't say that Jesus was, really tall and muscularly built and had this handsome chiseled face and these piercing eyes, and when everybody looked at him, they couldn't look away. It actually says just the opposite. It says that there was nothing special about him from the outside. But on the inside, his heart, his love, he was God himself wrapped up in flesh. And this tabernacle kind of gives us that depiction. That from the outside, it doesn't look like anything special. But on the inside, oh my goodness, what we come into, what we find there. And in a similar way, it's like that with the church or with the children of God. When we get saved, God takes up residence within our heart. God comes to live within us. And he begins making changes in us from the inside out. Our physical bodies are not transformed yet. That will happen one day when this mortal body will put on immortality. This corrupt body will become incorrupt and will live forever. But right now, we just look like everybody else. But we're not, because God's within us. And the beauty of a Christian should be the beauty that God makes on the inside, which is expressed into the world by the actions that we do that reflect what's going on. In the same way, the priest would go into this tabernacle. There were actions that happened on the inside that had an impact on the world outside. When they went in there and made the atonement, the sin of the people was dealt with. That happened all without any eyes seeing it. But it had a huge impact on the lives of the people and the lives of the community. And the same thing with us in the church when we're out there. The change happens on the inside, and what God brings out of us is a life-giving message of reconciliation. He doesn't draw people in with a flashy show on the outside and then no substance on the inside. That's the way the devil operates. The devil's all show on the outside, all glitz to draw people in, but when you get there, you find on the inside death, not with God. He doesn't draw us in by the flesh, but he brings us to himself. And when we come to him, and he opens up our eyes that we can see beyond the earthly, into the spiritual place, what we find there is life and reconciliation and beauty and holiness. And I pray that as you go through reading about this tabernacle, that you'd ask God to show you in its construction and its pattern a reflection of himself. And that we could see in these things the glory of God. That he would give us spiritual eyes to peer in, not just to this tabernacle and to the word here, but even as we're out in the world, to see beyond what just the eyes of flesh reveal to us, to see the glory of God that's all around us every day, and to manifest himself, or manifest the works of God into the world through what he's put in our heart in Jesus Christ. It's a wonderful study. Read ahead. If God gives us grace, we'll proceed into chapter 27 next week. Have a great day, guys. Bye.